a smuggler's life is life for me. Sailing around the coast, that's where I'll be. Smuggling ale and spirits offshore. Yes, a smuggler's life is life for me. Oh yes, a smuggler's life is life for me. Oh yes, a smuggler's life is life for me.
Seaford became a hub of clandestine activities, where the allure of forbidden goods enticed both the desperate and the daring. Join us as we delve deeper into the hidden stories.
It may well have arrived in Roman times. Another thing the Romans did for us, because of course they had taxes on imports and exports, and anything coming from outside the empire was particularly expensive. But thanks to the Dark Ages, we have absolutely no records. All we have is indirect evidence from around the Roman Empire about some odd cargoes which suggest that something funny was going on. Back in the 6th century, and this is my favourite story, and that is a couple of monks managed to smuggle out silkworms out of China. And that's how silk farming arrived in Europe. The records are somewhat scanty in the Dark Ages, but we do know that people were being taxed.
Customs officers have long been a presence in our ports, ensuring taxes were paid by foreign merchants. But it was during the reign of King John that they were first posted, seeking to extract dues from those who brought goods across our borders.
And these taxes weren't always popular. These would have been import and export taxes, custom duties.
This tale begins during those early times, where designated ports became the stage for a dance between power and wealth.
Next step forward really was the introduction of excise tax. So you had two types of taxation: taxation at source, taxation on imports, and taxation on exports.
In the shadows of time, hidden within the annals of history, lie tales of clandestine activities, daring exploits, and the pursuit of wealth. Our journey takes us to the shores of England, where centuries ago, the spirit of defiance thrived amidst the pursuit of profit.
And the great tax of the Middle Ages round here would have been wool. We're in the heart of the Downs, and the area is famous for its sheep rearing. Well, not many people realise that when they read Henry V, Shakespeare, that those French wars, Agincourt, etc., they were funded by customs duties, of which the main source was the export duty on wool.
In the heart of the Sussex countryside, the small village of Mayfield became a hotbed of owling activity. Here, one of the most prominent gangs of owlers formed alliances and connections throughout the south of England, and even across the English Channel. Among their ranks were wealthy farm owners, unafraid to wield weapons and challenge the authorities.
Oh, the fearless, dreaded Mayfield gang, smuggle ale and spirits across this land. The whole night long they'd travel near and far. The customs men could never prove who they were.
So avoiding taxes on wool was lucrative, the smuggling trade became known as owling.
The ravages of the 100 Years' War and the shadow of the Black Death left their mark on Seaford, once a bustling port and the largest in the county. The tides of fortune shifted, and the river's gradual silting led to the town losing its trade and much of its population. But survival demanded ingenuity, and the people turned to illicit activities to make ends meet.
Sea hags, the birders here call them, the moniker perhaps stemming from ancient folklore. A peculiar local nickname has taken root for the shag, a dark seabird with an almost witch-like appearance as it cuts through the sky.
Well, they were regarded by some because of their contemptible, despicable behaviour with no regard at all for human life. Well, they were named after the scavenging, opportunistic seabirds which habit the cliff tops around our shores. Because of the poverty and high taxes which contributed to smuggling, it was considered a form of employment.
The signalling system that the smugglers used at night was the hoot of an owl.
As the 13th century dawned, England emerged as a thriving exporter of wool, with Sussex's South Downs playing a significant role. But with success came the burden of taxes. In the days of Edward I, an export tax known as excise was introduced, a means to fund wars and secure the kingdom's interests. Over time, this excise grew heavier, burdening those engaged in the wool trade.
The taxation and smuggling didn't just affect merchandise, such as textiles and other goods. It also included services. In the 16th century, smugglers turned their attention to people smuggling. How else would you get a Jesuit priest into Protestant England? And that tradition didn't die out.
It was during the early 1700s that Seaford survivors delved into the world of owling, a trade in which goods were smuggled without paying the excise duty. Owling, often executed under the cover of darkness, earned its name from these moonlit endeavours. These reverse smugglers, known as owlers, found a way to turn the tables on the very system that burdened them. But amidst this covert trade, one must wonder about the role of the authorities.
In the 18th century, which is where we're heading, of course, how did the French aristocrats get out of France? People smuggling.
William Lowndes, the Member of Parliament for Seaford and a Treasury Minister, held a position of power and responsibility. Did he know of his constituents' activities? And if so, did he turn a blind eye to the very duty he was entrusted to enforce?
As luck would have it, the export of wool was finally banned to protect the textile industry. And in the middle of the 17th century, we have the English Civil War, and in comes a new tax. The navy that Cromwell had built up was now going all over the world, protecting our colonies from competition from the French.
On the 31st of March, 1778, the tranquil shores of Seaford were disrupted by echoes of a naval battle. Fear gripped the hearts of the townsfolk as the distant sounds hinted at a potential French invasion. Cannon fire reverberated for over 2 long hours, yet the dreaded enemy never appeared.
The army had to be maintained for continental battles, which finally culminated in the French Revolution and the conflict with Napoleon. All this had to be paid for. Source of taxation was custom duty still just as it had been in the Middle Ages.
In the year 1788, in the ongoing war against smuggling, Mr. Martin, a diligent customs officer, made a noteworthy seizure that left questions lingering in the air. It was in this year that Mr. Martin intercepted 3 horses, heavily laden with foreign wine and spirits. The records are silent on whether any smugglers were captured. One wonders why they chose to make off without putting up a fight.
Would you believe it? Income tax doesn't come in till the last year of the 18th century.
Did you say income tax?
And there is another aspect to this. With the troops and the navy away, there's virtually no home guard, and Britain has a fantastic coastline. It is relatively easy to smuggle goods in and out of an island, especially if there is no one on duty to watch.
The vigilant customs officials had another triumph in 1785 when a smuggling boat was caught near the tide mills. But it was the year 1783 that saw the smugglers emerge in full force. The Sussex Weekly Advertiser reported a daring scene as approximately 300 men descended upon Cookmere Haven to unload a significant cargo of contraband.
Unlike modern times, a lot of people didn't really regard tax evasion as a crime. They saw it as a form of free trade. And this included not just very poor people, of whom there were many, it also included respectable people like merchants and even vicars.
Peace be with you, my friend.
People were feeling that they were being fleeced by the government. So buying stuff on the black market was not really seen as reprehensible as it should have been.
They won't miss a barrel or two.
Big taxes, of course, were on goods like wine, liquor, tobacco, the things we tax today as well, lace.
Tea, a beloved beverage. Unlike the loose tea we're familiar with today, tea was once exported from China, pressed into blocks, making it easier to transport across long and treacherous journeys. These compact blocks of tea held the promise of profit as they travelled from distant shores to colonial America. But fate had a different plan in store for these tea blocks.
The differentials were so great that it was really worth smuggling, because the price of many items, such as, for example, tea, which everyone had to drink, it would be 2 or 3 times the amount you paid for the tea by the time you paid the tax.
It was amidst these dire circumstances that John Collier, clerk to the Cinque Ports, arrived in the town of Hastings. His purpose was to investigate the conditions of the imprisoned men and report back to the authorities. Imprisonment was a fate that awaited those who dared challenge the law. In the year 1715, a group of men found themselves locked away, enduring the harsh realities of a life behind bars. Stripped of their freedom, they faced unimaginable hardships. As he entered the prison walls, a sight unfolded before him. The men, frail and emaciated, were trapped in a world of misery and starvation. Stripped of their dignity, they lacked even the most basic necessities, such as shirts to cover their backs. Overwhelmed by the plight of these forgotten souls, John Collier took it upon himself to alleviate their suffering. He paid the jailer 10 shillings, hoping to bring some relief to their miserable existence. Time passed, and the men, still locked away, made a desperate appeal to the grand jury of the Sussex Assizes. Their situation had deteriorated further, with no clothes to cover their nakedness and starvation lurking at their doorsteps.
We are innocent.
The pay for smuggling was also pretty good, so that a labourer would perhaps earn in one night helping out in a smuggling operation, just moving barrels, they might earn in their day job in more than a week for one night's work. And if you turned informer, which was very risky indeed, you might earn 1,000 times what you would earn in a week.
Sir, I've got some information for you.
Crime, a dark underbelly of society, has existed since time immemorial.
It was a risky strategy as well, because in those days you had the death penalty.
In the quiet coastal town of Seaford, a clandestine operation unfolded amidst the tumultuous times of the 18th century. It was an era marked by political tensions, economic struggles, and the rise of illicit trade.
Not only could you be deported, not only could you be put in stocks, you could be gibbeted, which is hung and then suspended in chains. And in the case of pirates, they were often hung and suspended in chains and dipped in the sea for a number of tides so that people could see the victims.
The peaceful town of Seaford and its surrounding areas were plagued by a wave of criminal activities. The stocks. Positioned prominently on the corner of Broad Street and High Street, these wooden contraptions stood as a testament to societal retribution. However, as the years passed, the stocks began to show signs of wear and tear. Perhaps due to their heavy usage, the time had come for repairs.
The other risky element about smuggling was that it also attracted people who perhaps were a bit tougher than the spivs of the Second World War.
These incidents of theft and deception were not isolated events, but symptomatic of a society grappling with lawlessness and uncertainty. The fabric of Seaford was strained as its inhabitants faced the constant threat of becoming victims themselves.
The rewards were great, the penalties were high, so it attracted some very tough people who were pretty ruthless if things didn't work out their way.
Don't mess with us.
A few months after the seizure of contraband, 2 military forts were erected in the coastal towns of Seaford and Blatchington. As the local authorities sought to establish control over the rampant smuggling activities, the relationship between the customs men and the soldiers stationed at the newly constructed barracks remained uncertain.
And a classical example is the Hawkhurst Gang, which eventually managed smuggling across the whole of southern England, even though they were based in East Kent. In the end, the local people had to form a militia to restore law and order.
I have a family to feed.
And so, these incidents of burglary and drunken mischief, occurring years apart, left an indelible mark on the history of Bishopstone and Seaford, a testament to the resilience and resolve of ordinary individuals who refused to let the actions of miscreants go unpunished.
It's hard to imagine now, isn't it? Beating your wife, as long as it was before 9 o'clock in the evening, was legal. It wasn't against the law to beat your wife. It would definitely have encouraged more men to do it. The lady who ran the alehouse would have had a lot of freedom, and she would have had quite a lot of power as well. She was able to dilute spirits, and often she might not have known herself the ingredients that she was adding, and that made her probably feel quite good. If you wanted to have a little vodka, maybe I could help you with that, but not too much. If women did stray, there were terrible punishments. Well, of course, many desperate women turned to prostitution. Women who belonged to a brothel had more protection, probably, because the men who came to the brothel had to be approved by the brothel owner. But it didn't mean in the privacy of a room they wouldn't have even been attacked or murdered.
The fact of the matter is that both sides were armed. They had flintlocks and percussion cap guns. If you were hit by one of those, even if you weren't killed instantly, it is quite likely that you might lose a limb in amputation.
Oh, the Hawkhurst boys, they rode far and wide, smuggling over borders with contraband by their side. Heading down to Seaford Bay they were bound, when the customs men came rambling round.
The Hawkhurst Gang was a smaller local gang, and they were based at the Smugglers Inn in Alfriston.
Stanton Collins was a fearless man. A villain is leading me to the call, smuggling ale and spirits when he can, bound for Cookmere Haven along the shore.
And Stanton Collins is the outstanding character there. And basically they provided an innkeeping service. That was the day job.
Our ales are the best in the county.
Remember, smugglers operated at night and in secrecy. They had other careers. And one of the features about some of the organisers was that they were people's people. Their job was to make contacts, suss out who could be a friend and put up money for the smuggling trade, and open doors for them, buy the stuff, but also find out who, in officialdom, might be eavesdropping on them. So they were very much interested in what was going on in the community. Although there was some violence, there was also some humour. And one of my favourite stories about the Hawkhurst Gang is, in the Smugglers Inn, there are lots of secret cubby holes. And one day, the customs officers were after them. They arrived, and there just wasn't enough room to hide everyone. So one of them went down the road to the clergy house and hid under a bed in there. The customs men headed for the clergy house as well. They were going to check everywhere. And a lady in there decided to cover up for him. She went to bed and said that she just had a baby. And when they didn't believe this, they made a little young pig squeal to try and prove that there was a baby in the house. At this point, evidently, the customs officers left. I find it rather intriguing that customs officers couldn't tell the difference between the sound of a newborn baby and the sound of a pig.
As we delve deeper into this turbulent era of smuggling and the battles fought both on land and sea, we uncover the tales of those caught between duty and temptation, forever etched into the annals of history. A few weeks before the Boston Tea Party, on the 23rd of October 1773, Captain Killick of the ship Winchelsea made a significant seizure. He caught a ship in Seaford Bay carrying an illicit cargo, 130 half-anchors of brandy. The ship was brought ashore at Seaford, and the locals eagerly came forward to assist in unloading the contraband. Reports from the time suggest that these individuals, with what seemed like dexterity, handled the cargo with remarkable skill. But one wonders if this dexterity was not a touch of light-fingeredness.
You owe me.
Stanton Collins, who comes later, he's late Georgian, he was never done for smuggling. He was actually charged and convicted for stealing locally. So he got deported and not hung. And he came back, so the story goes, some 7 years later, and he ended up working for a vicar.
In the year that followed, fate dealt a harsh blow to the infamous Nympha Americana. This ill-fated ship met its demise off the treacherous shores of Crowlink, forever etching its name in the annals of maritime disasters. According to contemporary press reports, the people of Seaford were quick to seize the opportunity presented by the wreckage. They descended upon the site, driven by an insatiable desire to salvage whatever ill-gotten cargo they could lay their hands on. In the annals of history, this remarkable episode in the life of Seaford serves as a testament to the indomitable spirit of a coastal community facing adversity. It is a story of illicit trade and unexpected heroism, forever etched in the collective memory of a town that once stood defiant against the odds. Yet, this incident was merely a glimpse into the larger world of smuggling that permeated the region.
Well, the smugglers would certainly have been interested in wrecks as well, because they had cargoes. And in fact, some of the smugglers, the ones who were particularly good at maritime matters, some of them were actually employed by the government as privateers. Privateers were legalised pirates.
They call me Jack.
And the story of Nympha Americana, a famous local wreck, actually starts as a privateering capture. It ends up on the rocks as a wreck, at which point everyone becomes involved in trying to remove the cargo. The most important element in the cargo, however, could not be removed very easily because it was quicksilver. It was mercury. And the mercury was very important because it was used in those days for refining silver for making money. Although a lot of the quicksilver was recovered, as late as the last century, some divers spearing fish in the waters of the Seven Sisters noticed flashes of silver on the reefs. And then they realised what it was. 18th century mercury was still down there. So they bought some hot water bottles, the story goes, and filled them up with the mercury. And to this day, there is a jar which they donated to the local museum of the mercury from the Nympha Americana.
In the year 1744, Seaford, a town ill-equipped for battle, took measures to protect its shores. With a single cannon at their disposal, the townsfolk invested £1, 16 shillings and 10 pence to repair and maintain this humble defence. Little did they know that their frugal expenditure would soon be put to the ultimate test. On that fateful day, the 21st of May, 1747, a French privateer launched a brazen attack on an English merchant vessel in the tranquil waters of Seaford Bay. Boarding the ship with malicious intent, the French invaders were met with unexpected resistance. The sounds of the hostile takeover echoed through the air, reaching the ears of the vigilant men of Seaford. Undeterred by their numerical disadvantage, they hastily manned their solitary cannon and aimed it toward the aggressors. With remarkable precision, the cannon fired, hurtling through the sky. The unexpected strike caught the French privateer off guard, causing confusion and panic among the intruders. The enemy vessel, now in disarray, hurriedly retreated, leaving behind a perilous situation for their compatriots. Stranded and outnumbered, 23 Frenchmen found themselves captives aboard their intended target. The men of Seaford, united in their triumph, wasted no time in seizing the stranded Frenchmen. These prisoners, remnants of a failed assault, would become tangible proof of the town's bravery and resourcefulness.
Some of the other smugglers ended up as agents for the government. You might say which government, because they would meet smugglers from the other side, from foreign countries, especially if they were exchanging goods in the middle of the channel. There was a division of labour, of course, amongst the smugglers. At one end you would have the ship's captain, then you'd have the navigators working at night, then you'd have the specialists rowing the boats quietly to the shore. The tubmen are delivering the barrels onto the shore in the dark. They're the well-built guys who are bringing the merchandise ashore. They're guarded by the batmen. And the batmen were the real heavies, and they would be prepared, if necessary, not to lose the cargo. They would be prepared to take on preventative officers, and there are official records of battles on beaches between customs officers, the military, and the smugglers. Then you would have the landspeople supplying the pack horses, who would then be taking the goods further on. And this is where perhaps some of the women came in more actively. For example, on land they would be the eyes and ears for the smugglers, but in addition, the signalling system was such that you would only produce a very small light for all clear. They would then light a bigger fire. That would be an automatic signal, trouble ahead. And one way of doing that was to put extra logs on the fire inside a coastal cottage, making a fire burn more brightly if a signal was needed, suddenly causing a flare-up. And there is a case where they nearly set a house on fire. Because if you think about it, they can't go outside and suddenly light a bonfire, because that would immediately alert the authorities. What they had to do was do something more subtle, like put extra logs on the fire, and this could be seen out at sea.
While the owlers risked life and liberty for their forbidden trade, something peculiar unfolded upon the ship's return. Laden with contraband, they brought back goods that seemed incongruous against the backdrop of England's war with France. Spirits, tea and tobacco flowed freely, fostering a thriving black market amidst the chaos of conflict.
Well, a cuppa in the 18th century, quite likely, was illicit. The tea was almost certainly smuggled. But to the memory of these people, let's do it in correct style. You didn't drink out of the saucer. That was a Russian tradition. What you did is you picked up the cup, you put your thumb underneath, put your fingers round the top, That's how you drink tea in the 18th century. But you probably didn't even express yourself. You did it very seriously. This is a gentleman or a gentlewoman drinking. The children would be like this, and then old age pensioners like me would do that. But that was the lowest thing you could do as far as etiquette was concerned, to drink out of the saucer. Napoleon, before he attacked Russia, had to find money to pay for hundreds of thousands of troops. Well, you can imagine, after the French Revolution, confidence in French currency was at an all-time low. English gold sovereigns fetched a higher price in Paris than they did in London. They even had special fast boats to make deliveries to France so that Napoleon could pay his troops to invade Russia.
As the waves crashed against the rugged shoreline, whispers of secrecy and adventure echoed through the air.
Well, so why did the bottom fall out of the market? Taxes drop down. The Battle of Waterloo and the final defeat of Napoleon, Britain and the continent, especially France, enters decades of relative peace. Peace dividend makes smuggling much less profitable. And by the 1840s, you have all these troops coming back, naval officers as well. These people were perfect to recruit into the fledgling Coast Guard service. We then have the end of the Georgian era, and we have the Victorian era. And with the Victorian era, there is definitely a much more pious attitude within society to that kind of activity.
Good evening, gentlemen. And what would you like to drink?
Even if it was only in public, people were now far less smug about smuggling. It was a social crime and not a current activity. Started as officers' quarters during the Napoleonic Wars, same origin as the Martello Tower. These were military bases because at that time there was a fear of French invasion. That also interfered with the smuggling going up and down the Cuckmere. So basically the smugglers had to get the goods up the Cuckmere, up to Alfriston. At Alfriston, they would have been put into secret storage for a while, but of course the chief market would have been places like London, and you had to get the goods across the Weald. By the 18th century, roads are getting better. They had specially trained animals that not only would they obey commands, like clear off if a customs officer turns up and then find their own way home, those animals, they even had their fur shaved off, their hair shaved off, so if someone tried to grab them, they would slip away. Back to Britain come unemployed soldiers, unemployed sailors, and these were the perfect people to then take on the duties of first the coastal blockade and then what we now call the Coast Guard services, then become centres for Coast Guard operations. The last great confrontation recorded in Sussex is about 1833, and that's not here, it's down at Pevensey. Remember that Britain is not involved in a major conflict with France, and then France is an ally until the Crimean War, and that is in the middle of the 19th century. Heyday of smuggling may be over, but there is still work for the Coast Guards. The reason being is that the Channel is one of the busiest seaways in the world. And at the time, we're talking about the early 19th century, everything is still wind-powered. And there are numerous wrecks on the south coast from that period. And one of the duties of the Coast Guards would have been to keep an eye on shipping and also to assist with ships in distress.
Today, the Seaford of the 18th century stands as a testament to the resilience and tenacity of its people. While echoes of those tumultuous times may linger, this coastal town has reclaimed its peace, reminding us that communities united can overcome even the darkest of shadows.
By the 20th century, the Coast Guard service closed down at Cuckmere, but there is still a voluntary service to this day in Newhaven. Enjoy your cuppa, legally. Here's to all those rogues, their customers, and the people that rounded them up in the 18th century.
Let's raise a toast to all our absent friends and all the ones we always defend. Though we try to make amends, yes we know they're gonna catch us in the end. Oh yeah, they're gonna catch us in the end. Oh yeah, they're gonna catch us in the end. Oh yeah, we know they're gonna catch us in the end.